Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Hope everybody's doing well. I see that Chase just joined us, but before we get started, I'd also like to welcome Shadri Sands. Shadri's just appointed by council last Thursday, I believe, and is our newest Threshold Housing Commission member. So welcome. And for our agenda this evening, we really have Chase is going to provide us with an overview of some of the programs at DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development. This is our second educational session, and we have invited members of Threshold Housing Commission and the Planning Commission and various other folks that are interested in housing related items. Chase, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit and maybe give us a little bit of a background of what you do in the Outreach Planning and Compliance Office? And then second after that, if you wouldn't mind letting us know if it's okay for us to ask questions during your presentation or if we should hold to the end.
Yeah, no, so to answer your question, Art, no, it's not okay. I refuse to introduce myself. No, I appreciate that, Arnie. Yeah, as he said, Chase Sawyer with DHCD, Department of Housing and Community Development here at the state. Just brace yourselves. We have a lot of acronyms tonight. I'll tell you, when I first started here, I had a separate Word document solely listing out all the acronyms to keep track of. You know, DHCD, OPC, work with PAAO, NVA. You lose track of them all. But yeah, with DHCD in the Outreach Planning Compliance Office, a lot of what we do, there are two aspects to what we do. A core function of what we do is manage the ARC and CDBG programs, which we'll get into CDBG here later. But work with the program design, the application process, and work localities to put together good projects. The other part that we're slowly developing is the outreach and planning component. And so events like this, where I get to speak with you all and kind of talk about what we do, or events like Friday. I think I saw Olivia Rains on here. Friday, we were up in Augusta, just talking about housing. And so getting out and trying to introduce ourselves and honestly just, be a resource and be helpful in whatever way we can here at DHCD. And I believe I'm also joined by Matt Weaver. He's our associate director over in OPC. I know he was all the way out in Wise County today. I think he's in transit back. So it's been a long day for him, but he's also one. He'll be happy to jump in and answer questions that he knows way more than I do. So in the off chance y'all throw me a curveball, I'm putting it on him. But no, as we're going through, feel free to ask questions during. Like I said, we kind of put a sampling of programs we think would be applicable for y'all. But obviously, we don't know the city nearly as well as y'all do. And so if something sparks your interest, something you want to dive into, by all means, feel free to ask questions. This is y'all's session, and we're just grateful y'all invited us. So I didn't know. I guess it's only the second one, so I'm not sure there's any routine to this. But Arnie, you just want me to go ahead and jump in?
Sorry, I was muted. This is fairly informal. We're just this is the second educational session. So if you just want to share what you know about those programs, as I mentioned previously, at least through emails, we have had a READY grant, and we're trying to track industry, not just to Lexington, but to the area. Housing is an issue. Affordability is always an issue. So we're working through CSPDC with a housing study, but just sort of in preparation for that, I think it would be helpful for all of us to know more about what DHCD does, in particular with regard to workforce housing and affordable housing.
Yes, certainly. And that's where kick it off. I'm trying to share. I don't know, is there a way to grant the sharing access, or do I just have to hold up index card, Love Actually style?
I think you should be able to share now.
There we go. Awesome. Thank you.
Is it working?
Yeah. Just got to make sure I show you the right screen and don't give away all the government secrets. Let me see. There we go. So, and I'll be honest, it's been a little while since we've used Zoom. We're more of a Google-based platform over here, DHCD. So bear with me one second. Okay, let me see if I can make that a little more legible.
Yeah, come on in.
Y'all see that okay? All right, awesome. So yeah, who we are. Housing and community development are obviously in the name. It's a large part of what we do. But we also, broadband, I'm sure y'all have heard a thing or two about that and some of our recent initiatives. It's another large part. Economic development, which, as we were kind of talking about Friday up in Augusta, economic development and housing have really started to kind of go hand in hand. And that's something we've seen here at DHCD and tried to work together with, but, with some of our programs. But yeah, broadband economic development, DHCD, we also have the statewide building and fire regulations office housed in DHCD. And then obviously housing, affordability and efficiency in our homes, addressing homelessness, and then just looking for innovative solutions for affordable housing, which is what y'all invite us for today. So this is a few of the programs we have. Like I said, that we'll run over quickly, somewhat quickly, because we have entire how-tos and webinars, several times a year for each of these programs that, take entire hour, 2 hours. So to say I'm giving you a full briefing on any of these programs would be unfair to what they do. But just a quick kind of overview of what we'll be kind of looking at today. And like I said, if y'all have any questions during this, feel free to chime in and we can address anything and dig a little deeper in some of these programs. So the first one, our Affordable and Special Needs Housing, ASNH, write the acronym down. It's kind of a composite of 5 different programs, all in a single application. They're all very closely tied together. So you have the Home Investment Partnerships Program, National Housing Trust Fund, Virginia Housing Trust Fund, our State Permanent Supportive Housing, and our Housing Innovations and Energy Efficiency. This one, it's kind of an interesting one. I assume you all are looking at it from different lenses. And I'm sorry if I missed the introductions for who all is on the Threshold Commission. But, I figured, looking at it from a City of Lexington perspective, more so. So this is one where would not be applicable to local governments, not eligible applicants. However, nonprofit organizations, for-profit developers, and state-certified community housing development organizations, or CHDOs, and public housing authorities. So this is a large part of DHCD and a large section of our agency. And like I said, with 5 programs. This past year is about $88 million in funding split over 2 rounds. We'd probably maintain about that going forward. The funding windows, I think just closed at end of March and end of October. So second round, I assume, will be coming up here shortly in the fall. Yeah, a lot of these programs are usually rental or home buyer focused, not usually of both, but there are a number of rehab or new construction. This is one of the few programs we have at DHCD that helps fund new construction. As you'll see, a lot of the programs we look at do a lot of rehab, either substantial or just standard. This is one of the few that will actually help with new construction. It is a competitive scoring process. Not all of our programs at DHCD, believe it or not, are competitively scored, but this is one of them. In that application, what we look for are, what is the housing need for an area, for a locality? Is it, critical? Is it just, I say, if you talk to anybody that's in housing here in Virginia, housing is a need everywhere. So this kind of looks like comparatively, what does that need look like? What's the feasibility of a project? How likely is it to get done? And that's a recurring theme as we get to CDBG, Community Development Block Grant, next. Feasibility is another large one. Yes, we have a lot of funding, but there's also a lot of need. And so when DHCD funds projects, we want to make sure that there's a high success rate of completion. And then developer capacity. That's something I'm sure a lot of y'all have come across, developer or even staff capacity for some of these programs. And the grant administrators, what are they able to take on? With COVID, that's really stretched a lot of folks thin for a number of different reasons. One of them being there's a lot of extra funding that's been around. A lot of localities, and I'm sure Lexington got its fair share of CARES and ARPA funding. And so it's kind of really stressed the system a lot. So the developer capacity, among others capacities, have been stretched. But that is a factor in this. And again, it kind of ties in that feasibility. A lot of the funding, it's a deferred principal loans. So essentially they're loans, there is an interest only in the beginning, but the loans will be repaid in the end. But essentially these programs are used mostly for the closed financing gap. So that last bit. So this by no means would be the only financing for a project. This would be kind of that last little bit to help get over the hump for a project. Now this chart's got a lot to it, but I feel like it was the easiest way to kind of compare the 5 different programs that we have here at ASNH. So again, Home, Virginia Housing Trust Fund, National Housing Trust Fund, PSH. See, I already forget my acronyms. PSH and HIE, which I've got a colleague's got a very fun joke with HIE. Kind of gave away the punchline, but what's the friendliest program here at DHCD? HIE. So if y'all weren't on mute, I'm sure you're laughing. Thank you. There we go. It's tough crowd. I appreciate everyone. My wife tells me my jokes aren't that great, so I'll try to spare y'all first. So I appreciate it. But like I said, so this is kind of a comparison. There are a lot of similarities. There are some differences. Different programs have different funding amounts. Project limits are generally the same. So it's $700,000 per project, $900,000 if there's a PSH component. And forgive me, I got to double check what my acronyms are. That's going to bug me. Permanent supportive housing component. That's it. So you get a little extra. Most of them don't require match funding, with the exception being Home. Home program does require match funding if you're in an entitlement community, which City of Lexington, so far as I'm aware, is not. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's not.
You're correct.
Okay. All right, because if y'all were, I'd throw off the rest of my presentation. Mixed income projects are encouraged for a lot of these. Home buyer projects are home buyer based. As I mentioned, some are home buyer, some are rental based. Home buyer projects are part of Home, Virginia Housing Trust Fund, and HIE, not for the National Housing Trust Fund or PSH. Now, this is where the chart really made a difference, I thought. So we have different income levels for different programs, different eligibility levels. For LMI or low to moderate income individuals. When I say LMI, generally I refer to that 80% threshold. So it'd be 80% of the area median income, or the approximate median income for a family of 4. So last I checked, City of Lexington, median family income is about $69,000. So for a family of 4, 80% of that to qualify for LMI for a lot of DHCD programs, not all of, but a lot of, would be about $55,000. So you're looking at income, household income, about $55,000 to qualify for a lot of these programs, not all. And that's where you looking at this, like I said, homes got a 6% criteria for some components. National Housing Trust Funds 30% or lower. So that'd be, I believe, the extremely low to moderate income, extremely low income households. But again, it's just important. 80% is the general rule of thumb for a lot of our programs, but again, not all of them. And then affordability component. This is where it's, again, a lot of our programs, and specifically here, we have, and it's specifically the housing programs, we have certain affordability requirements. So it's how long does it have to be required? Is it required to be affordable? So these are done a number of different ways, depending on if it's a rental, if it's home buyer based. And these are kind of some of the differences you have here. Different mechanisms for different programs. Some are liens and deeds. Others are MOUs. But as I said, these 5 different ones have varying different, affordability, sustainability requirements, looking across the board. So I know that's a lot to throw at you. It's essentially 5 programs all wrapped into one. But I guess I'll take a second and, I know through there. Any questions so far? Everybody kind of, I don't know, any interest in any of these specifically?
What's the special needs portion specifically?
Say it again.
What's the special needs? Are we talking about elderly? Are we talking about mobility issues? Or I don't know what?
I'd have to double check what specifically the special needs is for this specific program. I can't remember these specifically. Different programs have the different criteria. Like for instance, we'll get to CDBG, what it considers not special needs necessarily, but some of it's limited clientele. LCCLI. I see.
Mm-hmm.
To answer your question, Matt.
Acronyms. That's the hard part. Hey, everyone. Matt Weaver. Yeah. So, Arnie, the idea is that it's going toward targeted class. So special needs really actually identifies a couple different areas. Permanent supportive housing is a huge activity. So housing that also has some of the supplemental services associated with some of those folks that would need that housing. But then it also goes toward elderly. And then several other, there's 8 targeted classes like Chase was just talking about that HUD defines. The special needs, the affordable and special needs housing does not necessarily mean you have to target a special need population. We lump it all in so that we can aggregate our federal funds and our state funds all together. And so the State Housing Trust Fund makes up the 60% of all the funds we put into this pot. So that is not targeted toward necessarily one area. What you're seeing with the kind of assisted units kind of category of where we put the AMI percentages is how if we get a project that comes in that has some, let's say a mixed income housing unit project. And so we can say, all right, we have at least 10 units that are 50% AMI, 20 units that are at least 100 AMI, and then the rest are market rate. We can then kind of adjust our funding to meet the maximum available kind of allowance or eligibility. So then we can say, all right, if it's a $3 million project, we could invest up to 600,000, 700,000, whatever that ratio might be up to our programmatic availability. So that's where the special needs comes in, is it allows us to open it up to those and prioritize some of those that go into different targeted classes, but it does not have to be a project that goes into special needs. It can just be in the mixed income or market rate housing within parameters of percentages.
Can I ask a question? And this is probably a dumb question. In Lexington, we have very little
available land. There's more in our county and we could partner with our county. But can any of these programs be used to expand current sites that serve either affordable or special needs housing?
That's a great question. So these five specifically, I'm not sure. I do know we have some programs that can be expansion or a significant increase in services, as we'll see in some of these later ones. It does kind of depends, I think, on the program. I think different programs have different allowances. But that's something I can definitely look into and get back to you on and figure out, because I'll be honest, a lot of the programs all kind of, when you're going through them like this, and I'm sure, and I apologize to you all, I know it's gonna be a whirlwind and a lot of stuff, they all kind of blur together. And so that's where, quite honestly, the best part, and where Matt and I selfishly get the most value out of these sorts of events, is having that conversation with you all and trying to figure out, if there are, rather than saying, here are all the programs we have to offer, which one fits, listening to you all and seeing, all right, what are the challenges? What are you looking at? What is Lexington looking for? What's its unique characteristics?
Mhm.
Which I will say, I forgot to mention in the beginning, I did spend 4 years in the area. I went to school down in Buena Vista. So I'm not a complete stranger to Lexington. It's been a little while since I've been down there. But as you all know, between Buena Vista and Lexington, there's nothing else really in the area. I remember I went down to, I think it was McAdoo's about once a week on Mondays for the wing deal. So I'm not sure if that's still open down there. But so, that makes, I recognize, Lexington doesn't have quite the open space that a lot of others do. And as you see, as we get to some of these programs, they are a lot more rehab based. And so you kind of have that potential to improve on that existing space. It's very few of our programs are having to reconstruct something a 1-for-1. It's improving what you have. We're not, with Department of Historic Resources, requiring a 1-for-1 rebuild. And so I think a lot of our programs recognize that. In terms of what kind of leeway you have in terms of improving that footprint, I'm not certain. And I'll be honest, with a lot of our programs, with a lot of the funding, it comes down to what the funding is actually going towards.
Mhm.
So in most cases, our programs, although they might not require match funding, there is other funding involved. And so it becomes a task of itemizing out, all right, if you have, X dollars coming from this program, that will cover, expenses A, B, C, whereas we can use the other funding to cover these parts. And so, we get very creative at DHCD with how the funding is kind of directed to different components of a project, which when you all, the next grant or next project you submit with DHCD, when we do get nitpicky and ask very specific questions, just know that's why we're trying to, we're doing it to help. I promise we are. But it is a great question, Leslie.
And Chase, so essentially, yes, upper story housing is a great opportunity, in a town like Lexington. There is some of a, just given the market values, you're going to need an economy of scale to make it worthwhile. To go after 2 units of CDBG, ASNH, other funding through DHCD or even our state partners, there's probably going to be an economy of scale of what you want to do versus historic tax credits, new market tax credits, low income tax credits, etc. So there's a balance that you have to strike. And I think that's where what Chase is presenting is it's a conversation piece. It's one of those things of there's no one silver bullet that matches what we need for rehabbing every property. And we want to have that conversation with you all to justify what you're trying to do. And Lexington, gosh, what you all are seeing, I'm not sure the makeup of this group necessarily to the, the community, but with two colleges, the historic aspect of Lexington, and then you mix in kind of just its population in the valley. There's so many opportunities, but also probably so many challenges you're experiencing. So there's not one silver answer, and I think it takes a combination of, private sector, public sector, as well as tax credit opportunities to make a lot of these projects work out.
I had a quick question.
I have a question, then I'll come after Nick.
Okay. My question is, you said these 5 programs, they all function as loans, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And what's the interest rate on them? You mentioned there's an interest rate.
I believe 3% is
Okay.
last program year.
That's the
Okay.
highest. A lot of them can be structured as 0, depending on the AMI makeup. They can also be structured as anywhere from 0 to 3 or forgivable. So it can be structured depending on the makeup of the beneficiaries on the outcome.
Thank you.
Could you describe some examples of mixed income projects? And in terms of the financial contribution, if the city has land as an asset, is that considered a contribution towards the total financing in your formulas you were describing earlier? So it's really 2 questions. Do you have good examples of mixed income that you like to promote or show or talk about? And then is city land an asset that is counted towards a contribution?
Pace, I'll take this one if that's all right.
Yeah, I do. Oh yeah, Matt. Yeah, of course. I guess I'll let you have this question.
I was actually just on a panel discussing housing policy in Southwest Virginia, like further down near Wise. But the idea of local government contributions or incentives opportunities is huge. And so, yes, I'm going to second question first before we get to the first, the examples. But if you have land, that can be a huge advantage to developers. If you have schools, former city buildings, or just greenfields, that's something that like a developer can come in if they're given the land or given title to that building or property with minimal investment. That just saves them from having to go through the private market to get to that property, right? So that's a huge savings in a lot of ways to create housing. What we've seen is opportunities for speak to old schools real quickly. Just the opportunity, like we'll sell it to you for $1 or $10. That sounds very minimal, but to give that developer control over the property, they can recreate up to 15, 20, 30 units at a time. And then they can target that toward a certain targeted population, whether it's seniors, whether it's low income, whether it's, elderly, handicapped, disabled, what have you. You all then can control that. Like before you give that property over, you can understand how that property will be conveyed and what they'll get on the outcome. That's one of those things of if you have property, to be able to associate it with an outcome, to understand what you want to get from that before you enter into agreements or opportunities with any developer. So even if we did Prices Fork Elementary just outside of Blacksburg. We put in several different funding sources, both housing, community development, economic development, etc. But long story is they had an L-shaped elementary school. And the developer said, I can do 20 units of affordable, elderly, 55 or older, it's not elderly, 55 or older housing units. I can do a craft brewery in the cavatorium, an auditorium and cafeteria combined. I want to do a commercial kitchen in the kitchen space. And then I want to do a farm to table restaurant in what used to be a little kind of round circular portico. Oh, but then I have 7 acres behind the building that I want to do 24 units of affordable townhouse development. And so that was an opportunity to take about 9 acres of a publicly owned site, former elementary school, and turn it into quite a few, about 50 units of housing, but also some community and economic development opportunity. That's a good, like a simple example. But then mixed use, mixed income. I mean, in y'all's neck of the woods, Northern Valley and over toward DC, there's been, I mean, just tons of examples of taking the first floor and denoting it for retail. And so if you think of your Main Street, you're an incredible Main Street community, but if you put the retail on the bottom and the first 2 or 3 floors above as residential, you can open that up. So if the city has properties in and near downtown, how could you convey that to a developer with a long-term deed restriction or a lease to saying you're going to provide X number of units of affordable housing or targeted housing, even like a percentage of like, give us 30% affordable, 70% market rate. Being in a, quote unquote college town, college students sometimes don't have access to income. So you can sometimes qualify even them as low income or workforce housing recipients, but taking care of your teachers, your police officers, fire, and EMS personnel, those are things where you can like justify those personnel as opportunities for targeted housing investments and use the public property you have toward creating opportunities. There's also, new ideas. Land trust is not necessarily a new idea, but you can keep retainage of some of the land and sell the development rights above the land so that someone can buy a house. And if the total property of house and land is $300,000, you retain $100,000 to $50,000 of the land value. Therefore, their house is only worth $200,000. That could actually get someone into the new housing market, or even into progressing through the housing market. They can get some equity, but they don't. When they sell, it usually generally goes back to someone that's in that same affordable housing market. So there's a lot of different examples. We can send you some in an email or like kind of links to some of the other projects. Our affordable and special needs housing program just received, I think we had $30 million to allocate, and we had almost $60 million worth of interest. So it's overprescribed annually. It's a huge market for it, but we continue some examples of some projects for mixed use and or mixed income, just so you can get a kind of an idea of what those might be.
That would be very helpful, just to give us some ideas. I spent time in my previous life studying mixed use, mixed income projects, and that 70-30 ratio you mentioned is one that I remember coming across quite often. So, how do we get? You could send Arnie links on this kind of information, and then I guess maybe the next question I have is, how do we get, or is there any technical assistance of some sort to help Lexington work through what its options could be?
Absolutely. We can send you stuff. I think Chase has a few more slides. I want to let him get through that. Lexington is really poised well for a lot of the Department of Housing and Community Development programs. It's a city that's independent. You control all your assets, but you're also not so grand or population heavy to where HUD deems you as entitlement. So we've had great experiences working with the city and with a lot of different kind of projects over the years in different various spaces. But I think we have opportunities to kind of pick y'all's brain to see what might be the priority or the area of most focus. I want to give Chase a chance to walk through a couple more programs, but I'd love to come back and pick your brain as to where we should focus, where we should, help you all invest, And then if there's opportunities for prioritization and or, next steps, we'll work with you all on that because you're driving the boat.
Thank you.
Yeah, with that segue, yeah, this is one component, 1/5, programs we have here at DHCD. The other large one we have is the Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, and that's a more common. That is one of the few programs I'd actually heard of before I came to DHCD. Federal program. That's where the entitlement, non-entitlement kind of comes in. There are a lot of the cities here in Virginia receive their own CDBG funding straight from the federal government. And so as being a federal government program, they have a lot of their specific regulations. Within those regulations, we have some flexibility, state to state and, locality to locality kind of different program designs, but they all must meet one of 3 national objectives. An LMI benefit is the most common, I'd say here, at least for us, most common national objective we try to meet. So again, addressing those, about 80% of the area median income individuals benefit to them in through one of these programs. Slum blight elimination or reduction is the other national objective that comes in handy with housing rehab projects, some demolition projects, but then also more commonly with our business district revitalization projects, where it does exactly what it says, and we'll get to that in a second, but it's revitalizing the business district, the downtown. And then urgent needs, the other national objective, not as common, but in instances, Buchanan County. So y'all's neck of the woods-ish, a little bit further southwest, with their recent flooding, though. That's where this comes in with an emergency declaration from the governor or from the president. But again, not as common. We generally focus on the LMI benefit of the slum and blight reduction or elimination. Non-entitlement localities are the only eligible applicants. So the city of Lexington would have to be the actual applicant for this project. Others are more than welcome to assist the city, consultants or, Planning District Commission, your PDC, by all means are, more than welcome to steer. That's just wherever the city's, comfort level is. But at the end of the day, the grant would go directly to the city, and the city would be the one responsible for it, essentially. CDBG, it's the first word, community. It's a very community focused process. So whether that's in the designing of the project or the actual execution of the project or in the end result of the project, it's very community driven. Documentation of need is a big one. So documenting that need, whether it's surveys, whether it's census criteria. And that's one where, the city of Lexington, although the city is pretty, relatively well off, I believe based on the HUD's numbers I saw, 51% of the population's, I think 51% is below that LMI level, that 80%. And I believe you have, of your three of your 6 census tracts, I believe are over 70% LMI. And so when you're looking at, again, documentation of need, that's something that can go a long way in making it a little bit easier on that end for some of these project types. But yeah, public hearings, there's a public hearing. We have 2 public hearing requirements for CDBG projects. And then community spark plugs are another thing, we call them, but it's the, your average Joe, it's your citizen, your person's really motivated. We want to see it kind of from the community, from the citizens, the folks that don't have necessarily a vested interest in the project, but just have a passion for the community and want to see it strive. 4 technically really funny categories. So we have our competitive projects, we have our open submission, we have urgent need, and we have planning grants. And I've kind of split out the competitive and the open submission because really where they differ. As I mentioned, the urgent need, it's just that, not as common. And God forbid you all have, flood or some kind of, emergency. Hopefully we won't have to worry about that one. Competitive projects, we have the 4 different types here. Our competitive applications are, again, just that. They're competitively scored. Applications generally open up in January and are due April. April 1 was the deadline this past year. So we receive all the applications, we weigh them against each other, score them, and then the projects that score the best are awarded funding out of our pot. This past year, we had almost 10 million, so $9.7 million to award projects. We're still working through that scoring process. Within those competitive project types, we have housing rehab on a targeted basis. So as opposed to our open submission, which is scattered. So targeted being a contiguous project area. Comprehensive community development. Well, I don't know who made these slides. Should put in a different order. Housing rehab, public infrastructures, water, sewer, drainage improvements. Water and sewer being the most common one. So projects like that, again, LMI benefit. Comprehensive community development are generally projects that have more than one activity tied to it. So generally, it is a housing rehab project with public infrastructure tied to it. Is generally what it is, and it's the different types of public. So maybe it's just water, just sewer, water and sewer, what have you. But so a larger project. And again, we're looking at contiguous project area for all three of those. Community service facility is one of those where it's wide open. So you're looking at your, daycares are the common one that we get applications for, but are one of the most difficult ones to try to justify the funding for to HUD. But a community center, which you think of, and that's where it's a very gray, it's a grayer area, but it gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of what we look for. And again, that's where those get difficult in terms of proving those LMI benefits. How do you document it? How do you demonstrate the need? How do you ensure, the end use will be within HUD's regulations? And then the business district revitalization, as we mentioned, that's generally your downtown, whether it's a traditional downtown or just a business district. A lot of that it's facade improvement, public infrastructure improvement, streetscape, sidewalks. But looking at that, and that can be to I lost them. I think it was John's point, the mixed use. So business revitalization can have a housing component to it as well, as we're looking at those projects. So those are competitive projects. Again, that period just wrapped up here in April. There may be a second round in the fall, but most likely, it would be next year. It'll open back up in January, and again, same timeline. Open submission projects is the period we're in right now. So those, we start out taking applications starting April 1st and run through the end of the year, or unless funding's exhausted, whichever comes first. We set aside about $6 million for those each year. And again, with that, we have a housing rehab, but a scattered site. So not necessarily, we still like for it to be in a somewhat general area. It doesn't have to necessarily be contiguous. Public services. So it's one where the flip side of a community services facility, whereas the community service facility in the competitive project is more of the physical, tangible items, the actual construction. Public services is more of assisting with the funding of those services. So it kind of two sides of a coin, depending on what angle you're looking at your project. Local innovation and community economic development. Those are ones where, we had them together, we kind of split them out now. But again, that's kind of a lot of leeway with those. A lot of those we look at, job creation. So we're able to usually meet our LMI benefit without one for job creation. And so being able to provide, I can't remember the exact criteria for an LMI for a job meeting LMI benefit, but it has to do with the, having certain number of jobs available to individuals with certain education levels and certain backgrounds. That's more common there. Again, less the housing component with that one. Construction ready water and sewer is exactly that. It's just construction ready, project, water and sewer, it's ready to go. You just need the last little bit of funding. And regional water and wastewater again, is that it's a project that addresses, water and wastewater regional basis. Usually has to do with the consolidation of systems. So multiple systems kind of, coming together and working through that. But again, yeah, we try to name these pretty obvious, so they're easy to follow along, more or less, with a few caveats here and there. And then the last part, I didn't spell it out because it feels almost redundant. So we also have planning grants. So planning grants are kind of the pre-construction phase. They help you determine the feasibility, determine, what do you want to do? Is this a fit? Will we be able to meet the LMI benefit? We have planning grants that essentially correlate with each type of these projects, and then some. We can also use them for studies. We can also use them for community organizing. Planning grants are a good way to, you say, we have this need, we've got an idea, there's something here, let's flush it out. And that's where a lot of this is, and I guess back up with a lot of these programs, here at DHCD, it's all about conversations. We don't like to just, get a grant application and just review the grant application, and just judge on that. We like to have these conversations like we are with you all today. So you get to know them. And so that's where we kind of start those conversations and then lead to a planning grant and then lead to a full construction grant. Generally, they're anywhere from about maybe, $10,000 to $50,000 or $60,000, depending on the type. But it's a good avenue if you're, still need to flush out some ideas, need some help getting over that hump to fully flushed out, either PER or just project in general. Not all planning grants have to lead to a full CDBG construction grant. We like to see them, but they don't have to necessarily lead that way. I know that's another large one. I promise the next few are a little more abbreviated than the first two. Any questions, or Matt, was there anything you'd like to add that I left out?
Yeah, real quick, a CDBG downtown project, Buena Vista, was just awarded last year, about $1 million. And so you can look, across the interstate to your sister city to think through infrastructure design associated with business development. And then Rockbridge County has been really active in the housing rehabilitation as well as the housing production. So just outside of y'all's town border, Habitat for Humanity, and I'm blanking on the name of the road, but right near Interstate 64 going west of 81, Habitat plus Rockbridge County High School built, I think it's 12 Habitat houses. And they use CDBG to do the road work, the water sewer work, to kind of build out up to 24 units, I think it was, capacity. So your area has been really active in CDBG involvement, and there's opportunities yet to kind of be realized, but just throwing it out that, housing production, housing rehabilitation, and downtown revitalization are happening right next to you.
So, and that kind of ties into the next one, our IRF, Industrial Revitalization Fund. That's one I believe I saw the City of Lexington was awarded a planning grant for McLaughlin Street. It's 114 McLaughlin Street. So an IRF planning grant for that one. IRF's one where it's in this past year gotten a lot more interest. It went from having a budget of about, I think it's 1.5 million to, I believe, 22.5 million over the next 2 years. So from 1.5 to nearly $50 million. That large influx was ARPA funding. So there are some strings attached to that, but it has allowed for the program to really take off. They had the planning grant round at the beginning of the year, which sounds like, Lexington was able to take advantage of. And then they'll have the actual construction, their full grant here. I believe applications are open, deadlines mid-August, August 19th. But so your Industrial Revitalization Fund is one where at face value might not really seem like it's a fit for tonight's conversation with housing. Target is, vacant interior properties with a commercial component. The key is commercial, and that's where a lot of these projects are. However, they can be a mixed use project. So only 30% of the facility or of the property, 30% has to be commercial minimum. So it gives you a lot of flexibility as you talk about these mixed use ideas, mixed use projects. And that's 30% either based on square footage or based on revenue. And so again, yeah, y'all already had the planning grant in there, and with this increase in funding opportunity, it's a real great opportunity. Can be publicly owned property, but y'all can apply on behalf of nonprofits or for-profit entities. There would just be a certain agreements and then sort of loan details have to work out that are outlined in the program. Like I said, 30%. The tradition. So there are technically still the two separate funds. They're the traditional funds where you can apply for up to $1 million, and it is a 1-for-1 funding match requirement. But it is, it's pretty straightforward in terms of the allowable uses and and I believe it's a little bit lengthier of an application process. With the ARPA funds, you can apply for up to $5 million, and it is only a match requirement over the first $1 million. So if you apply with the ARPA funding route, under $1 million, there's no match requirement. However, with these funds, you do have to have a COVID tieback. So you have to somehow justify this property and the uses and the reason for this project, being stemmed for, coming from the pandemic or, certain economic hardship. So it's depending on circumstances, different routes. Obviously, there's more funding available in that chunk of funding. But as I mentioned, either funding source is very flexible in the allowable uses and in terms of what they consider match. The biggest one is that for this funding program, the acquisition costs are considered match funding. I believe if you've already acquired, so you can either use funding for acquisition, I believe. We could also use them as match if you already have that property on hand. In purchase, I think there are certain time windows with that, but that's what I learned the other week that I think can, really makes it. When you think about match funding, that's always the downside. I know in working with local government, there's not a whole lot of extra money around, and so come with match funding is a lot of times the hardest part of a project. But if you can already take into account the assets you have or you've acquired, it makes it a little bit easier. All right. I don't know. I want to say 6:30 is what was blocked too. So I want to make sure give time at the end. I don't want to monopolize everybody's time tonight.
Chase,
Yeah.
while we're here with the IRF, your first line there targeted towards vacant deteriorated properties with a commercial component. Does that mean the property had to have a commercial component on it before, or are you getting into it needs to have one as part of the revitalization?
I believe it had to have one at some point.
In that case, as an example, would a old VDOT residency qualify as a commercial component?
I don't know. That is a good question. I
wouldn't presume so, but we may have that situation.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, you would need to make the argument. So the program is for commercial and industrial, formerly commercial industrial properties. So if you can make that component that a former VDOT property is commercial, and that would kind of bring you into the eligibility for the program. They're very flexible. So IRF will work with you to try to think through what you have going on. They want to be catalytic. They want to be opportunistic. And I mean, as you know, like VDOT properties are oftentimes some of the best properties to revitalize. So think through that, kind of think through your opportunities for how you could sell it or justify it, and then let's work from there. But the application is pretty quick, so let's move on that one. If you have a property, let's think through it.
Can you, going along with Arnie's question, can you give an example of how you tie it back to the ARPA funds and you would build something that was COVID related or?
It wouldn't have to be COVID related. The end use wouldn't have to be COVID related, but I think it would be demonstrating that there was an economic hardship. So, Matt, sounds like you want to chime in.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's one of those our staff are trying to be pretty flexible, kind of in the interpretation of COVID related. So you can make it staff shortages, construction overages, availability, what you're trying to, the outcome of, so we've seen some kind of Airbnb properties. So they're trying to make short-term stays that are more, you can come in and occupy the unit without social interactions, which is not great for economic development, but fits the COVID, kind of COVID space. So it's pretty loose on what you can do to occupy the space. I will say IRF traditionally is $1.5 million. And we got $20 million, like Chase said, to utilize, but we're trying as an agency to showcase how we can catalyze these projects, not just for COVID. We'll be real loose in COVID kind of regulations or how it responds to it, but how we can take these funds and make it like catalytic for downtowns, for communities, for places, so that we can hopefully have industrial revitalization funds at like 7 million each year as opposed to 1.5 million. Because if you haven't thought about these funds before, Lexington is primed for it, because if you have a historic building that has a no offense to storefront churches or even vacancies, but like if you have some vacancies or underutilized spaces, you could transform that into a coffee shop, a restaurant, or whatever, and then also utilize the funds for the exterior while taking private leverage or other leverage and putting it into the upper story housing and putting that into the connections back into the downtown or the universities. So like IRF is designed to take former industrial and commercial spaces and make them a catalyst. So Lexington is primed for that because of your association with the college campuses, but also some of the historic aspects. And then, you have a robust downtown. So downtown may not be the best place to focus, but your strip malls, your access is off 81. There's tons of opportunities to think through IRF. And then COVID just brings an opportunity for us to reinvest that. If you can make any association with an impact from the COVID pandemic.
And again, that's one, if y'all have any specific questions, after tonight, more than happy to continue the conversation and, Matt, myself, or with the IRF team, figure out the best way. And as you mentioned, August, so we May, June, July. So coming up here shortly for funds. But it's been seen a lot of interest recently, and very exciting project for a lot of areas, like Matt said, like Lexington.
I think one good example could be the Country Cooking building right off of Interstate 81 and 64 that was closed because of COVID. If there's a developer out there that could develop that property with these funds, would be great.
Yeah, that'd be a great tie-in. It's hard to tie it back to COVID hardships and that. All right, the next sort of larger, I say larger, but more applicable project sounds like for what we're talking about tonight. So acquire, renovate, and sell. Again, this is targeted more towards your first time LMI home buyers. And so, it does exactly, you acquire, you renovate, and you sell. Eligible providers, so folks that are eligible for this program, pretty reaching. So local governments, nonprofits, housing authorities, your PDCs, $45,000 award, and there are no geographic boundaries. Number of projects sometimes have, entitlement, no entitlement. You have to have a provider, all that, anywhere in the state. So essentially, the way it works, let me see if I can best explain it. So the person interested, the developer, if you're the provider, would purchase the property. So you purchase the property, using their own funds, funding source, whatever it may be. They then renovate the property, and the key part is an undervalued property. So based on assessed under the market value. So they acquire the undervalued property. They then renovate the property using the ARS funds, again, up to the $45,000, and then other sources if they need to. They then take the property, sell it, market value, sell it to, again, a first-time LMI home buyer. They then return the ARS funding, so if it's 45, it's 45, whatever it may be, return that, and are able to keep the net proceeds from that sale. This is a fun program that we partner with Virginia Housing on. So they actually provide the funding for that award. But again, this is one where you kind of talk about, those rehabs, those small ones, undervalued properties, which I know is hard to come by an undervalued property in today's, climate. But again, a way to kind of, as we talk about, I know the general conversation tonight was affordable workforce, housing. So this is, again, another one kind of geared towards those criteria, although, specifically the first time home buyer. So a few programs we have less related to our general conversation, but I thought were worth mentioning. So our IPR, EHARP, and WAP. These are more one-off programs, more for individuals. I would categorize them more for, individual or home buyers in need. So indoor plumbing rehabilitation program is just that, forgivable loan for LMI owner-occupied properties that they need indoor plumbing. And then there are a couple other exceptions, but generally those need indoor plumbing, which, might be less a priority, less of a concern or a need in your all's neck of the woods, but some of the folks who work with down Southwest, it's a common program, Southwest, Southside. EHARPs, our emergency home and accessibility repair program, again, does just that, funding for urgent emergency health and safety hazards, or physical accessibility to barriers. Both this, and all of these, we partner with other program organizations to administer the program. So for you all, for both IPR and for EHARP, that's Total Action for Progress, so TAP. They're the ones that we work with to administer these programs. And then the Weatherization Assistance Program, again, does just that. It works to reduce the household energy through the installation of cost-effective energy savings measures. And along that, it's worth noting with a number of programs, specifically CDBG, but the High E program, energy efficiency in the name. With a lot of our programs, we're been slowly trying to work in the energy efficiency standards and trying to leverage some of these energy efficiency or weatherization programming funds and trying to inject them into some of other programs. So that's for energy efficiency as well as lead hazard reduction. Been trying to work those funds into some of other programs. And so it's one where, at face value, why would you be spending this extra money, for the energy efficiency improvements? Well, when you're talking about, an LMI household or someone that's, paycheck to paycheck, dollar to dollar, every little bit helps. And so we can justify a lot of these improvements, with the funding, but also, from an affordability perspective, it can help that those monthly bills come down, which does make a difference, even $20 here, $30 there. really makes a difference to me. So these are just some of the programs that we kind of oversee, but we work with partners to implement a lot of these. Just thought it'd be worth just mentioning when we talk about housing. Similarly, again, it's not, production or rehab, but we have some, financing and tax credit programs that we administer as well. So homeownership down payment assistance, DPA. It's that. Up to 10% or 15% of sales price. 15% is depending on certain areas that we've identified, but generally up to 10%, and then up to $2,500 for closing costs. And again, these are for eligible, applicants. So again, your 80%, your LMI, first-time home buyer. We also have a Virginia Individual Development Account, so VITA. That's actually a pretty cool one. For tonight's conversation, I've put in here that ties into home buying, but this is also another one for business development. So this is also one that we use in some of our other economic development related tools, but it's essentially an 8-to-1 match. So for every dollar the participant saves, there's a match of up to $8 of $8 up to $4,000, which goes a long way. I mean, that's a heck of a investment. And that's specifically for down payment assistance we're talking about here. Again, for certain qualified individuals. This is also, in the business conversation, can be used for some of the business startup business costs as well. And then finally, we have our livable home tax credit. So this is for folks that go in either new construction or retrofitting accessibility. So if it's a new construction, I believe it has to have 3 accessibility features. If it's a retrofitting, it's 1. So a tax credit of up to $5,000. So you go in, you put in the upgrades, and then you submit for this application the tax credit afterwards. Again, these are all, I figured, home related, make it somewhat affordable, somewhat accessible for everybody. And with that, with all those acronyms, all those programs, that's, again, highlight of some of our programs. By no means is that everything that we have to offer. Like I said, we'd be here for probably the rest of the week. But Matt and I are happy to, answer any questions now, or, our contact information. Happy to reach out. Like I said, we just want to have a conversation, have a dialogue, and figure out what's the best fit. Not only what's the best one program that fits, but what are the different programs we can cobble together. Different programs we used, to leverage other funding sources. And we like to do that. We like to have, coming up from different angles and, create the most good we can. So, with all of that, does anybody have any questions?
If nobody else does, I'll start with another. Have you seen, and I can't remember in Matt's example from Blacksburg, about the brewery and the mix of uses in that, if there was actually a mix of incomes as well. So I guess my question is more about, if you have a rental project and we have a number of market rate units, and then we also have a smaller percentage of low income housing or low income units in there, how often do you see that? And also, how much of a burden is it for the developer to prove on a monthly or yearly basis that those 15 units or whatever the number is remain affordable, and how long would they have to remain affordable? So I'm just wondering about sort of the reporting requirements, and if people are willing to get into that.
The reporting requirements for each program varies. I can speak for CDBG. We do our best to have the least burdensome reporting requirements. So we try our hardest to make sure we're getting all the reporting requirements up on the out front. So then we're not having to continually monitor a project 5-10 years out. So the second question, it varies. It depends on what the different programs, different requirements. But we do try our best to, we love talking to y'all and we love monitoring, but we also are stretched with capacity, and want our best to, especially with the federal programs, meet the requirement, justify the project, and then leave you all be until the next project. Back to the first question, how common is it? And Matt can correct me if I'm wrong. It's not as common as I think we'd like to see. I think we'd like to see more of that, but I think you're right. I think folks kind of get concerned with the reporting requirements, or like I was saying, it's the itemizing of costs and making sure these funds are going here, these funds are going there, and some of the reporting. And so it's not. I don't think we see as many mixed income, mixed use, projects pulling all together as we'd like to see. And I know that's something that our office here at OPC, we've been trying to. One of the thoughts behind our new office was to try to work to improve that.
Yeah, I think the idea of there's no one percentage of a mixed income property that's going to get funded. And there's no one that makes the silver bullet to get kind of approved and built. And so it varies per project, but the idea of a project that's going to be mixed use, even and especially mixed income, is going to have some kind of development agreement to where they understand a certain percentage of the units are going to be affordable at a certain price point. And like Chase put in the, one of the entry slides for affordable and special needs housing, if you go super low, 30% AMI, you're going to get every single funding source available through that program. If you go to 80% AMI, you may only get 2%. If you go 100% AMI, you may only get the state funds. There's not a priority necessarily of how we allocate the funds. We try to do it off of a submission basis that we can say across the board, we're accepting applications for projects that achieve affordable housing throughout the spectrum. And so your question of just the mixed use or the mixed income question is good because usually it's a 10-year performance agreement. So if they say, hey, we'll allocate 20% or 30%, 40% of these units toward an affordable rate, they'll be held to that for 10 years. If they decide not to, then they prorate that and pay it back based off of what that, the year in they're at. What happens is all these will be at a 0% or up to a 3% interest on the construction loan. So it'll fit in with all the capital stack they have. And then if they have the performance agreements in place, it just kind of just reduces the loan they have, the burden they will be undertaking to hopefully provide additional affordable housing units or workforce housing units, in Lexington.
So how would it work in a mixed income property when you have a certain number of affordable units, for instance? Who does the eligibility of those families, and who does the ongoing eligibility for them? Or is that something different than Section 8 or tax credit?
Yeah, it's the property management. So essentially, you'd be marketing a certain clientele for a unit. So if you have 20 units in a building, you'd be saying, all right, 4 of these, 5 of these, 10 of these are available to a certain area of median income. And you'd have to justify that based off of the application agreement. It's the same thing that Virginia Housing, I believe USDA would do. And so it's one of those, it's the application process that kind of, you verify their income, you verify what they can afford, what they should be paying, and then you make the eligibility based off of the application for the apartment. If it's a condo or it's a for sale, like an owner occupied, it's all in the agreements for the contract, and so you can verify that up front.
So the property management folks would take care of however way they want to handle it with the market rate tenants as well as the affordables, and need to learn Section 8 or tax credit programs.
Yes, ma'am. And oftentimes I would say like a lot of our DHCD funds align with or can be kind of mixed in with the other funding in the capital stack.
Mhm.
Therefore, the eligibility kind of just is seamless. If you justify it for a lot of the other funds, you also hit our funding too. And the reporting is a lot more simple on the back end.
Okay.
Chase, are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, and I apologize for any background noise. I'm at a conference, and the place where I decided to post up is now next to another conference's happy hour, so I apologize for that. My question is about the DPA, the Down Payment Assistance Program. I work for the CSPDC, and we are the regional administrator for the DPA program. And maybe this is not the right question to ask you and Matt, maybe someone else at DHCD, but I'm wondering if there are any conversations around updating the DPA program. We've had a lot of trouble serving clients since COVID for a number of reasons. Number one, the five times of your income being the home price limit, with the housing market being the way it is. When we're serving a client that's income is $35,000 and their home price limit is 5 times that, so like 175, it's almost impossible to find a home that meets that home price limit and that we would feel good about encouraging that client to purchase. And also with the requirement that they must get a home inspection, which I agree with, but right now with the way that the housing market is, there's always an offer where another person is waiving a home inspection. And so the challenge hasn't been finding clients, but the requirements of the DPA program are making our clients less competitive. And I'm wondering if there have been any conversations about the DPA program in relation to just how crazy the housing market is right now.
And Olivia, you're spot on. And that's the hard part right now. Like I just quoted something that 47%, median sales prices are 47% higher than they were 18 months ago, 2024 months ago, 125% higher than 10 years ago. And so a down payment assistance, you have $175,000 gets you nowhere, right? You can't even buy a condo. I mean, you may be able to buy a townhouse in some areas, but is that setting people up for success? So you're right. I don't know the answer. I need to run that by our DPA folks to kind of figure out where we're at. I do know that through our Virginia Individual Development Account, VITA program, and I would think through DPA, we're constantly assessing kind of where we're at. We're not going to do programs that are leaving people out to dry. I'm not saying we can keep up to current market trends by any means, but with inflation, with the construction market, with sales prices, we have to increase. And we normally, unfortunately, do that annually, not quarterly or even monthly. But I would think that there'd be an adjustment coming soon to the DPA program. And hopefully, Chase and I can definitely navigate that to our DPA folks just to say, hey, is there anything we can do? It's no guarantee, but I hear you. And it's one of those of, I just like that we're going to have to kind of, sales prices are crazy. And so, yeah, if you can sell your house is great. If you can buy a house, that's even better if you can buy a good discount on a price, because that's few and far between, and leaving people high and dry to try to start a life or even try to buy their first home. We want to be responsive. So definitely hear you. We'll pass that along.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Chase, maybe one last one. if the city has a project or potential project, is it okay if we, in the near future, reach out to you and maybe have you help us negotiate through all the stuff that you just went through? Because that was a heck of a lot of information. And I'm just thinking about what sort of, not program or sort of program, I guess we could set up for that particular project with your help navigating all of what you just spoke about.
Yeah, no, I mean, by all means, certainly. It's one of those things I say a lot is, I know a decent bit about the programs. Matt knows, as he's proved, so much more. But even what we know compared to the actual program managers, pales. So, yeah, if we don't know the exact answer, the fit, the project, if it's not something directly under our purview, we'd be happy to work with you to do that. We do have a number of great folks in our staff, that aren't program dependent. We have great capacity builders. They can also help in that regards here too, to help think through and flush out those projects as well. And I always like to offer up their services because they're very incredible at what they do as well. But no, but by all means, I hope that Matt and I would be y'all's first call and contact point, and then once y'all find somebody better, y'all can move on. But no, please, that's what we're here to do. Project development is one of the things that we really enjoy, and want to make sure it's the best fit. And like Matt said, there's no silver bullet for any one project. It's kind of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And so, no, please feel free to reach out. I know I'll be having a conversation with, I don't know if it'll be you, Arnie, or somebody. I know there's been talk about a, CDBG planning grant for property in the area. And so I don't know. I know we'll be in touch with that here shortly, I would imagine. But no, please feel free to reach out. I had the slide up with my contact information, but and I think you can find it on DHCD. When we send the follow-up email with the examples, we'll also be sure to have the contact information there as well. But just chase.sawyer at dhcd.virginia.gov, matt.weaver at dhcd.virginia.gov. But yeah, no, we're happy to be a sounding board and to work with y'all through these project ideas. And maybe something comes of them, maybe they don't, but we're happy to work with y'all to get to that point.
Appreciate that. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. This is all very exciting. And you're talking about, tens of millions of dollars that's now you have available. But the thing that concerns me is that's, even though it's a big number, it's not that much when you think about all the different communities who are going after this. So if you even talk about the $45,000 home program, that's great, but that's really only about, if it's a $10 million project, you're only talking about maybe 1,000 homes, if that much, maybe 600 homes. But what is it that makes us as a community say this is a good investment of our time and resources? Because we're pretty confident we will be competitive and that we can move up to the top of the list.
I'd say it's this tonight. It's showing that there's a committed community, that y'all are passionate about this and you're willing to drive it through. It's not just city council. It's not just the business, the business owners. It's not just a certain, again, somebody that has a vested interest, that it's folks such as yourselves that are coming out here spending, hour and a half listening to me and Matt, on a Wednesday night, after 5 o'clock to do this. So showing that there's that drive and that community want and need. But then also, again, it's these conversations that goes a long way. You can only put but so much project description on paper. You can only demonstrate a community need or a service need, but so well on paper. So it's having these conversations. It's demonstrating that there is that capacity. It's showing that there is a strong track record of success, or if there's no, previous track record, demonstrating that there's a high chance of success with that. You got to start somewhere, obviously. So to say, a strong track record is a prerequisite would be unfair. But so demonstrating that there is a strong likelihood of success with these projects, Because you're right. You think about this, yeah, tens of millions of dollars. I'll tell you, when I was in Powhatan County before here, and I thought it was a big deal that we got almost $1 million for broadband. I was, very proud of myself. I was like, this is awesome. Serving a few hundred, homes, great. Within I think the first couple of months, we were working on a program for $10.5 million to a food security project for $10.5 million statewide. And just my little $1 million project just went, out there. Because you think, yeah, it's a lot of money, but at the end of the day, it's the small things. So sure, $10.5 million, but it's split across, a number of different regions. And then within those regions, within those banks, it's different pantries. And within those pantries, it's individual needs. So it's slowly chipping away at the need. We recognize we're not going to be able to solve everything, that the need is greater than the funding we have. And even if we had all the money in the world, we just don't have the capacity. There are, no contractors, there's no staff, there's no supply. The logistics of, supply chain logistics are holding all up. And so even if we had unlimited funding, we wouldn't be able to solve all these problems immediately. But it's slowly been able to chip away. A few houses here, a few houses there, trying to redevelop and trying to build that momentum going forward.
Now, I was not intending to be critical. I was just trying to evaluate how, and so I hope you don't take it that way. I'm just, if with limited resources, how much do we invest to get this thing going is what I'm thinking about. I think it's fantastic you have had these huge influxes of resources to be distributing, but I just want to be realistic about, what we need to do to make this happen and evaluate. So please don't take it critically.
No, not at all.
Hey, Chase. Contrary to Chase's kind of assessment, like to your point of like the opportunities, they're there. And so all of our funding is hopefully set up to maximize the public sector investments. So a housing project is not going to get funded unless it has a lot of other capital stack already in play, ready to go. And then our funding is coming in for gap financing or to maximize gap financing. And that's where there's so many things that are involved with kind of building a project. There's no, again, one solid answer. We're lucky, we're flush with resources currently. That's not going to be the case for very long. The good part is that the housing trust fund is gaining popularity. Went from about $7 million just 2 years ago to about $35 million this year. In the proposed budget, it was 50. Hopefully that stays. Obviously, we're seeing a little bit elongated project or process for a state budget, but the Housing Trust Fund is an opportunity for truly building out housing opportunities across the state. And that's where, to Chase's point about the Affordable and Special Needs Housing Program, the Housing Trust Fund state program is a major funder in that. And so CDBG is a federal funds, home is federal funds, the National Housing Trust Fund, those are pretty stable, but you're not going to see a big increase in those. State funds are where we can see big upswings and downswings in our funding. And that's where we also, as citizens of the Commonwealth, have the ability to lobby our local delegation, senators, members of the House of Delegates, to say, hey, this is what we'd love to do. All of our programs at the Department of Housing and Community Development go through an input process. We welcome all kinds of stakeholder input, and we try to adhere to a lot of the studies or the ideologies of the General Assembly. House Bill 854 came out last year, and DHCD is a really good partner in that. Like our programs are truly forming to state programming for using taxpayer dollars to build out housing. I just say, like, if you want to be proactive in that, design projects, like think through what you could do in Lexington to maximize any input, public or private, and let's figure out what we can do, because that's where Chase and I can respond best. We can give you an overview. We can talk about, what may happen, hypotheticals. But if you have some ideas, we'd love to talk through with you, and then bring in the other partners that actually are more familiar in different areas and think through it, what we can do. I think you all have so much opportunity given again, the two colleges, the proximity on 81, and just, the beauty, the natural resources you have. Let's think through what we have, and let's come back and think through some projects or where we can go from here.
So let me just get this right. I'm sorry I take him so much time, but so what you're saying is that you have to start establishing yourself as a community with long-term vision, and that there's going to be fluctuations in the resources available, and we can get excited about what's right now, what's there, but what's the opportunity is, but we need to kind of establish our own track record or some approach that indicates that we have a long-term vision that can take advantage of these short opportunities.
Yes and no. Absolutely. If you have an opportunity now, let's go. Let's go. There's no reason we shouldn't pursue a project or a development. But if you have ideas, then let's think through a strategy. Let's think through where our opportunity. And I saw some other funders on the call. How can we bring the people to the table to make this work easier? So yeah, you're not excluded now. Let's go if you have an idea, but we can also be opportunistic and think through strategy going forward.
If there aren't any other questions, last call.
So it looks like, John, you've got your hand up.
Clapping.
I don't know if it deserves that.
I'm clapping. Thank you. You answered my previous question very well, and I think you've given us a lot to think about.
Can I close with, I apologize. I'm not standing in front of you and getting to meet you all in person, because there are so many opportunities in the city of Lexington. There's just, I feel like obviously you probably also feel that same way. There's a great sense of place. It's an amazing place to grow families, to obviously educate and grow young adults. But there is a huge value in trying to reinvest and then also produce new units in and around Lexington. And so as your group, kind of reconsider and consider opportunities, keep Chase and I in mind. We'd love to come and be a part of those in the future. I think there's opportunities in the future. DHCD, obviously, we don't have a state budget yet. We anticipate having good funding for housing projects, but we also have good community economic development projects that could tie into mixed use outcomes. So I think this has been a really fun conversation to kind of follow, and I think there's a lot more to come.
And just a last, appreciate your offer to send along some examples to us.
Definitely. We can definitely do that.
Suspect you both will be hearing from us sooner than later. We probably have a couple of projects, maybe near term, and then also we're excited about what the PDC can do for us in the housing study and what may come out of that. And I personally did appreciate listening to both of you. So thank you very much for your time, particularly after hours. And I know that we're maybe taking you from some sort of conference or convention. So thank you both. And we will have this conversation posted on our website before long.
No, thank you all. And yeah, please keep us in mind. And if Matt and I are passing through, we'll be sure to do the same.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Y'all take
Thank you.
care. Thanks again.
Bye.